My name is Annette Tappert, and I am proud and honored to be the co-chair of this year's PEN Gala. And I would like to also introduce my fellow co-chair, Larry Kirschbaum.
Good evening. I know you're all going to talk through my remarks, but so be it. Good evening and welcome to our 2009 Gala. I'm happy to report that publishing lives. Look at it. Tonight, we have raised for the Gala and for our programs such as the Freedom to Write and the PEN Global Festival, $1.2 million. Given the economic circumstances in our country and in the world, I think we should all feel incredibly proud at this accomplishment, and it is for such a good cause at a time when PEN and other organizations have been struggling for dollars. So thank you all very, very much. It takes a dedicated team to make an evening like this happen, and I want to thank our co-chairs, honorary chairs, and vice chairs. I'm going to ask them to stand. Please hold your applause until the end. First, co-chairs. I know it's kind of dark in here, but you'll see shadows of them anyway. Annette Tappert. Where is Annette? Please. There she is, beautiful in yellow. And Steve Plachette Murphy. Where is Steve? There he is, our guy. I cannot say enough good things about what they've both done. And Steve, as a new member this year of the development group in the Gala, you've been a godsend. Thank you. Our honorary chairs, I don't know if she's arrived. Yes, she has arrived. Tina Brown of the Daily Beast. Formerly a Gala chair, now an honorary chair with her husband, Harold Evans, a fabulous writer. The irrepressible Tony Goodale, please stand. Who has managed to corral, I think that's an appropriate word, Steve Croft tonight. He says, I can never say no to Tony. Thank God for that. And finally, our financial guru, John Trobe. John, where are you? There we go. And last among our chairs, but certainly not least, our publishing chair tonight, John Makinson. John is the worldwide leader of everything in general and the Penguin Publishing Group in particular. So I also want to salute our sponsors, Ron Marshall, CEO of Borders. Ron, where are you? We're certainly delighted to have you here for the first time. He will be presenting the Borders Award to Ed Doctorow. It's appropriate also to introduce Marcus Dole from the Random House Group. He just happens to be Mr. Doctorow's publisher has been for many, many, many years. Rodale Publishing under Steve Murphy, who we've already introduced, but we'll applaud them again. The Bloomberg Group, thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, my colleagues at the highly talented LJK Literary Management team. And finally, I want to special thanks to three people who have been very, very instrumental in the success of PEN. First, Michael Roberts. Michael, would you stand? Michael has been our outgoing director, has been responsible over the past decade plus for the extraordinary growth of PEN. He has helped build this organization into one of the most powerful forces for freedom to write and the importance of global literary partnership. Michael, thank you. Secondly, stepping down as chairman of the PEN Global Festival after 5 years, founder and chairman of our festival, and that is Mr. Salman Rushdie. Salman, where are you? Right there. And finally, our outgoing president, Francine Prose. Francine. Francine has proved that you can have a brilliant writing career while at the same time spending many hours immersed in the administrative details at Penn. And she has set the bar very high for our incoming president, Anthony Appia, who you will be meeting later. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our Master of Ceremonies. In fact, he's a person that needs no introduction. More of you in this room know him than know me. I think he should be introducing me, but we'll go this way. If you've been spending your Sunday nights on Mars, or you've been busy tweeting rather than tubing, you may not know who he is. But he's now in his 20th year with CBS's 60 Minutes. He's been chief correspondent of 60 Minutes since May of 1989. He is the winner of countless broadcasting awards, including the biggest news interview of 2008, the first post-election interview with Barack and Michelle Obama, which was broadcast to over 25 million viewers. More recently, Steve did an incredible piece for you sports fans out there on basketball star LeBron James, where he threw a basketball underhanded 3/4 of the court, a perfect swish. And according to Steve, a first take. Steve has received 3 George Foster Peabody Awards, which are the Oscars of broadcasting, as you all know. One was for Friendly Fire, a Gulf War story that explored the tragic occurrence of soldiers accidentally killing men on their own side. Another Peabody was for Veronica Guerin, about an Irish reporter gunned down by drug dealers. And a third for All in the Family, one of the finest pieces examining the conflict of interest between military contractors and the government in the awarding of contracts. Most recently, Steve has won the Robert Kennedy Journalism Award, the Fred Fendley First Amendment Award, and an Alfred DuPont Columbia University Silver Baton for his investigation of the disappearance of over $500 million from Iraq's treasury. Steve has been a principal correspondent previously on West 57th, foreign correspondent, and covered international terrorism in Europe and the Middle East. It's especially nice to have Steve here tonight because he has been a supporter of Penn and attendee for many years. Ladies and gentlemen, we're deeply honored to have Steve Kroft.
Annette, where are you? We need you back up here. I've often wondered what it was like to speak at a political convention. I may get my wish tonight to find out. I want to thank everyone for coming. When Tony Goodell asked me to do this last year, she said I could sit at her table, and I made the comment, do you think that that will be the only table here, or will there be more than one? This was back in the depths of October or November. But it's wonderful to see so many people out here for an event which Calvin Trilling called earlier a celebration of the buggy whip. And contrary to rumors, there are no stimulus funds being handed out here. I'm here because, like most of you, the work I do depends on freedom of expression. And for 85 years, Penn has worked to defend that right around the world. The acronym originally stood for, and I've always wondered this, for poets, essayists, and novelists. But the group, at some place along the line, lowered its standards and decided to admit people like journalists and literary agents. But its mission is still very high-minded. It assists writers abroad facing censorship and oppression, and it defends the rights under the First Amendment here at home. It works to advance literature by recognizing excellent writing, by cultivating new audiences, and by encouraging a new generation of writers in low-income communities, in prisons, and elsewhere. As this week's 5th annual PEN World Voices Festival brilliantly demonstrates, it seeks to promote a global exchange of literature and ideas that help us to transcend the barriers that separate people and nations. Later tonight, you will hear about two courageous individuals who made great sacrifices to sustain that global conversation. But first, I want to introduce to you PEN's new president, who embodies that international ideal. Kwame Anthony Appiah is a philosopher, a cultural theorist, and a novelist who was born in London, raised in Africa, the child of a British writer and a Ghanaian statesman who was imprisoned by the Nkrumah government. After earning his PhD at Cambridge, he embarked on a distinguished writing and teaching career. His book, In My Father's House, won the Hershkowitz Prize for African Studies in English, and he has taught at some of the world's finest universities. Before becoming PEN's president, he spent 6 years as PEN's chairman of the Freedom to Write Committee, and he is currently the Lawrence Rockefeller University Professor of Philosophy at Princeton University. Please welcome Kwame Anthony Appiah.
Good evening. When I was a child in the new Republic of Ghana, my father was, as has just been mentioned, arrested and imprisoned, having fallen out with our increasingly autocratic head of state. Security police arrived at our house looking, so they said, for seditious documents. And so they began searching between the pages of our books. But after a few hours, they gave up. We had a lot of books. "You haven't finished," my mother protested. "I want the president to know that my husband is innocent." They continued. She served them tea. My mother, as you heard, was an Englishwoman. By the end, they were begging her permission to go. Of course, what was truly seditious, at least from the perspective of an autocrat, wasn't between the pages of the books. It was on them. A concern for human rights, for human dignity, for the ideals of citizenship. These things, among so many others, were nourished in our home by dog-eared copies of Cicero and Dickens, Tolstoy and Wordsworth, James Baldwin and John Stuart Mill, and by the resonant language of the King James Bible. And our family was sustained too by other words, written by people in other countries, people we did not know, addressed to our president, to their newspapers, or to us, demanding the freedom of an innocent man. Simply letting us know they were on our side was a deeply heartening gift. It's the kind of generosity that PEN members have practiced over 9 decades. Often, as you know, we help obtain the release of detained writers. But even when we don't, we strengthen them, their families, and their friends, and we strengthen the cause of freedom. As someone who grew up, sustained both by the vital words on those dog-eared pages and by the compassionate words of generous strangers, I'm honored to have been asked to preside over PEN's work for a little while. One of my tasks as a member of the board many years ago was to serve on the search committee that found our executive director, Michael Roberts, and I'm only sorry that he's leaving as I arrive. We owe him, as Larry said, a great debt for our current strengths. I'm grateful too, as Larry also said, to my predecessor, Francine Prose, who's handed on a presidency that appears to be in very good order. Sustaining literary culture has always been, and will always be, the heart of PEN's mission. It connects our work for literacy with the freedom to write, because the freedom to write is predicated upon something more basic, which is the freedom to read. Literacy, translation, the struggle against censorship and persecution, all of them fortify and enlarge human possibility. And your commitment to those projects helps give them reality. So enjoy this evening, enjoy the festival, and thank you all so much for your generous support.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm now delighted to introduce John Makinson, who is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Penguin Group, which is the publisher chair and the premier sponsor of this year's PEN Literary Gala and the PEN World Voices Festival of International Literature. In other words, the man with the deep pockets, although it wasn't always that way. John came to publishing from journalism after graduating from Cambridge with honors in English and history. He joined the ranks of the ink-stained wretches at Reuters as a correspondent on a tour of duties in London, Paris, and Frankfurt before landing a job with the Financial Times, where he eventually rose to become the financial editor. After a stint as vice chairman for Saatchi & Saatchi's American Holding Company, he returned to the Financial Times as financial director. Besides his current duties as chairman of the Penguin Group, he is also the chair of trustees for the Institute for Public Policy Research, which is the United Kingdom's leading progressive think tank. Please join me in welcoming and thanking John Makinson.
Thank you, Steve, and good evening, everybody. It would be a pleasure and it would be an honor for me and for Penguin to be supporting this event in any year. I think it is, though, a particular pleasure and a particular honor to be doing so in 2009. The values that PEN embodies are absolute values, and I hope that through our support tonight, we can demonstrate that they could, can, and should be resistant to and perhaps impervious to economic adversity. Second, this is an opportunity for us to celebrate the arrival in this country of a political establishment which is not just literate, but determinedly literary. The current administration, inside and outside the cabinet room, is heavily populated by published authors, and the resulting babble is a welcome sound in a civil society that has always celebrated argument and diversity. As it goes in America, so it goes elsewhere. Barack Obama is not the only published world leader, though he certainly outsells his rivals by a margin. Both Nicolas Sarkozy and Gordon Brown have employed the format of the book to tell us about their lives and to tell us about their thoughts. But why does this matter? And in particular, why should it matter this evening to PEN? It matters, of course, because in a media-dominated political culture, the politician's most powerful weapon is the use of language. President Obama's ability to harness nuance to rhetoric is central to his early success, both as a world leader and as a practical politician. But as we all know, elsewhere in the world, this same language is used in this same media as an instrument of concealment and of deceit, which is why the role of PEN as the guardian of free speech in hostile climates is fundamental to the spread of tolerance and of plurality around the world. Powerful and honest dissenting voices can sustain liberal values and they can topple regimes. We have seen it happen. In Pakistan, the extraordinary courage of a determined independent judiciary and of an articulate free press stopped a military government in its tracks as recently as the end of 2007. And it is no coincidence that Pakistan's literary culture today is one of the most exciting and challenging in the world. Nadim Aslam, Daniel Muinuddin, Muhsin Hamid, Mohammed Hanif, Ali Sethi, Kamila Shamsi. These are all young and often iconoclastic writers who deal fearlessly with questions of personal and of national identity. They are winning literary prizes all over the world with a kind of brio that we remember from the emergence of Indian writers onto the world scene just over a decade ago. And international publishers, we international publishers have all centered that commercial opportunity. So literary agents' phones are ringing off the wall around the world, and the books are selling from New York to Auckland. But I believe that we have a broader responsibility to ensure that these new voices are also heard within their country of origin. The welcome freedom of international mobility means that the energy of many emerging literary cultures, and I am thinking here as much of Nigeria and of Somalia as I am of India and Pakistan, may be dissipated through a geographic diaspora. And sometimes the domestic publishing industries in these countries have neither the resources nor the experience to do creative and commercial justice to their most distinguished talents. So we international publishers must, I think, do more. And I would like to take just a moment to describe to you the approach that we are taking at Penguin. Other publishing houses are undertaking similar initiatives. I'm just more familiar with what we are doing at Penguin. Last week, for example, at the London International Book Fair, we announced the creation of the Penguin African Writers Series, a worthy successor to the Heinemann African Writers Series that many of you will know was created by Chinua Achebe in 1962. I'm happy to say that Mr. Achebe has agreed to be the consulting editor for this series as well. And simultaneously, we announced the establishment of 2 African Writers' Prizes, one for fiction, one for non-fiction. Our goal here is not just to support African writing, but to promote writing in Africa for an African readership and audience. In the same way, we are about to launch Penguin Arabia, based in Dubai, which will publish and distribute a limited number of titles, initially in English, but in time also in Arabic. Now, in some parts of the Arabic-speaking world, notably in Egypt and in Lebanon, there is already an embedded and energetic literary culture, but elsewhere in the Gulf states, for example, secular writing has really yet to take a hold and to establish deep roots. And we will be there with our Penguin spade, I hope, as it does. And to return for a moment to my earlier Pakistani theme, I am hoping to raise a Penguin flag in Lahore within the next year, and more countries will follow. We must also do more to encourage the spread of literary translation into and out of the English language. In India, we are already publishing in Hindi, in Marathi, in Malayalam. We are publishing Penguin Classics in partnerships with local companies in Korean and in Mandarin. Over the next year, we will extend that program to Japan and to Brazil. But we must be honest. This is mostly a one-way street, a conduit for English language work to reach local language markets. In order to promote the flow of reverse traffic, we must strive to enhance the quality of literary translation and to develop in our own English language markets an audience for the kind of writing that this festival and this organization does so much to promote. We already support a successful annual literary translation course in Beijing, and we are planning to extend this model to other countries in time. But we have a long way to go. What's important, I think, is that as a community, we have the conversation about these issues and take action to affirm the values that PEN represents and that we, all of us, hold dear. This evening is an opportunity to have that conversation, and I hope that the actions will follow. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'll be back in a little while to present the prizes tonight. Enjoy your dinner. Hello, everyone. Can I have your attention? Well, half your attention anyway. PEN wants to express its gratitude to Borders Books. PEN wants to express its gratitude to Border Books for helping to recognize that what used to be called the power of the pen is still very much alive in the digital age. And I want to introduce Ron Marshall, the Chief Executive Officer of Borders Group, who's going to present the 3rd annual PEN Borders Literary Service Award, which honors a truly distinguished American writer whose critically acclaimed work helps us to understand the human condition in original and in powerful ways. Ron Marshall.
Thank you, Steve. When I was told about this award's existence, shortly after arriving at Borders, I was gratified that our company and PEN had the foresight 3 years ago to create an honor that not only celebrates the world's most acclaimed authors, but also focuses on the idea of literary service, of helping us understand the human condition in original and powerful ways. It strikes me that understanding the human condition is vitally important to keeping us all human. Ultimately, it is the ability to place ourselves in another's shoes that holds humanity together. We build empathy through understanding. We build understanding through information. And to me, the most powerful information of all is the story. It's been said that the novelists we honor tonight with the 3rd annual PEN Borders Literary Service Award, E.L. Doctorow, believes that to write of the past is to write of the present. This suggests a moral imperative, especially as we consider how our behavior in these times will mold generations to come. For his work, E.L. Doctorow has earned numerous accolades and critical acclaim. His 4th novel, The Book of Daniel, was widely held as a masterpiece. Ragtime was named one of the 100 best novels of the 20th century, and World's Fair received the National Book Award. His novel, Billy Bathgate, won the PEN Faulkner Award, the National Book Critics Circle Award, and was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. The March, published in 2005, was awarded the National Book Critics Circle Award for Fiction and the PEN Faulkner Award. It was also a Pulitzer Prize finalist and a nominee for the National Book Award. A tireless advocate of free speech and free expression, E.L. Doctorow is also prized for his piercing political commentary. In the July 2008 edition of The Nation, he wrote about the former Bush administration, saying, in part, "The president we get is the country we get. With each elected president, the nation is conformed spiritually. He is the artificer of our malleable national soul. The media amplify his character into our moral weather report. He becomes the face of our sky, the conditions that prevail." Tonight, we are all grateful that E.L. Doctorow and his writing have been for our nation in a very positive sense, the face of our sky. It is my deepest honor now to introduce E.L. Doctorow, the recipient of the 2009 PEN Borders Literary Service Award, and to present him with his first edition, 2-volume set of the personal memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant, published in 1885. This is very cool. They were completed just 5 days before his death. And it was Mark Twain who encouraged, edited, and arranged for their publication according to Grant's wishes. Ladies and gentlemen, I present E.L. Doctorow.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. When I first joined PEN The meetings were held usually in the grungy, badly lit room that was the PEN office in those days. It could just barely accommodate the 15 or 20 writers, poets, and editors who showed up for a meeting. Later, our homelessness was emphasized as the board rented space in the Salmagundi Club on Lower Fifth Avenue. But with the growing urgency of PEN's mission, the numbers of writers in trouble all over the world increasing exponentially, and a disdain for the idea of literary life and independent witness seemingly pandemic, it was clear that PEN, if it was to function effectively, needed a major infusion of money. So we had a meeting, and someone pointed out that in most organizations, the financial burden was carried by its board. Whereupon Bud Trillin, in a state of panic that I have never seen repeated in this calmest and most imperturbable of men, leapt to his feet and shouted, "We're not that kind of board." As indeed we weren't. It was Norman Mailer, yes, Norman Mailer, who in the mid-'80s as PEN president revved things up and brought into our organization elements of the enlightened wealth of our city that resulted in today's managing partnership of writers and non-writers. The freedom to write and the flourishing of unaffiliated witness, not just a vocational interest, but an absolute necessity for us all, there being no hope for life in the body of any society without the circulation of ideas, without a culture of unconstrained self-expression, uttered in freedom and in the face of outraged proprieties of whatever kind. We can have global swine flu in one season or global economic slumps in another, but the global working over of writers and the strangulation of free expression is for all seasons. It is constant and unremitting. Writers are imprisoned and murdered, whether in countries of the right or in countries of the left. And even sometimes here, the strangulation finds its form as school libraries ban books that have offended someone's sensibilities, as textbook publishers eliminate from their texts scientific facts that are deemed unpalatable by religious zealots, and as our federal government would assume the right to know from library records what we're reading. So, when we stand against the suppression of writers in China, or Uzbekistan, in Serbia, or Egypt, or Vietnam, or Zimbabwe, we're defending ourselves. Because this is a disease that is catching. And just as torture as a government policy is catching, just as the secret reading of emails and illegal tapping of telephones is catching, just as dismissing international treaties with contempt is catching. It is why I said, and Ron Marshall just quoted, that to write about the past is to write about the present. I believe that were I to write a novel about Galileo, when the Inquisition arrested him and forced him to recant his heretical view that the Earth was in orbit around the sun, I would be writing about the present. We can understand why an authoritarian government would feel threatened by the investigative reporting of a journalist, but it is perhaps more mysterious why verses of a poet or the stories of a novelist would require retribution, until we remind ourselves of the feelings that can be released in a human breast by an image, or the self-knowledge in the manner of a revelation that can rise from a story. In a theocratic society, such as that favored by the Taliban. God has done all the writing that is necessary, and a literary practitioner is most likely a blasphemer. In a secular dictatorship, the ruler understands that literature is the other profession that knows reality is amenable to any construction placed upon it. I do thank PEN and Borders for this Literary Service Award. Of course, performing a literary service, making something of redeeming social value, is or should be the last thing on a writer's mind as he or she writes. It's better to feel an overriding occupational desperation for having gotten oneself into a book and living in the lines with no way out except through the last sentence. And finally, I remind us all, perhaps belatedly at this point of the festivities, to wash our hands several times a day and not kiss one another's cheek. Thank you very much.
Finally, tonight, we honored two members of the international community who risked their lives and their livelihood to defend the freedom to write. Each year, PEN joins with the Association of American Publishers to confirm the Jerry Labor International Freedom to Publish Award at the PEN Gala. It's part of the year-round partnership between PEN and the AAP's International Freedom to Publish Committee, partnership that pays tribute to the fact that writers and publishers are inseparable allies in the fight against censorship, and that behind every great work of forbidden literature that sees the light of day, there is a daring and heroic publisher. The two groups' latest collaboration has been the establishment of a PEN Center in Cambodia, a country whose entire literary culture was wiped out by the Khmer Rouge. This year's Jerry Labor International Freedom to Publish Award goes to Paljor Norbu, a traditional Tibetan printer and publisher. And here is a short video that tells a little bit of his remarkable story. We're honored tonight to have with us Paljor Norbu's daughter and granddaughter.
My name is Katya, and Paljor Norbu is my grandfather. This is my mother, Tsamche, who just said thank you. It is a great honor for both of us to be here to accept this award for my grandfather, who has given his whole life and all his energies to publishing Tibetan texts destroyed during the terrible years of occupation, and also to rebuilding the monasteries and temples. The Tibetan struggle, which was on the front pages of papers last year, is still going on. And we would like to ask everyone here to do everything they can do to do justice and help my grandfather and all of Tibet. We need your support to help Tibet. Thank you.
Our final prize tonight is the PEN Barbara Goldsmith Freedom to Write Award, which recognizes international literary figures who have been persecuted or imprisoned for exercising or defending their rights to express their views. This year's honoree is the Chinese dissident and human rights advocate Liu Xiaobo.
I have the privilege tonight of presenting the Freedom to Write Award to Li Xiaobo. It's very special for me because he's one of our own, a former president of the Chinese PEN Center, and that does such important work in advancing freedom of expression in China, in spite of, as you've seen, the heavy negative pressure that has put him and 6 of his compatriots in jail. Edgar Doctorow expressed it so beautifully. Freedom to write is the heart of PEN. And every year when I give this award, we know that you're helping by being here and by helping turn the spotlight on these writers of conscience. And this year I'm asking you to do one more thing with a special sense of urgency. Inside your program, you'll find a postcard, and when you go home, take a moment to look at it and follow the link and put your name with the other thousands who have got their name on the PEN petition to free Liu Xiaobo. And if you're a journalist, keep the spotlight on. And if you're out talking, keep the spotlight on. The work of PEN, as you've seen this evening, cannot function in silence. It can only function with your participation. That's why I end every speech with a repetition, keep the spotlight on. And now it's my honor to introduce 2 representatives of the Independent Chinese PEN Center, Sheng Yi, the current president, and Longlin Li, the Vice Secretary General of the Independent Chinese PEN Center. And you will hear a remarkable statement that we have received from Liu Xiaobo's wife, Lin. Please join me in welcoming these 2 representatives.
Now I'm going to read the statement made by Liu Xiaobo's wife. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pity that both my husband Liu Xiaobo and I could not be present this evening to receive this award. 26 years ago, both of us were writing modern poetry. It is through our poetry that we became acquainted and eventually fell in love. 6 years later, the unprecedented student democratic movement and the massacre occurred in Beijing. Xiaobo dutifully stood his ground and consequently became widely known as one of the so-called June 4th Black Hands. His life then changed forever. He has been put into jail several times, and even when he's at home, he's still, for the most part, not a free man. As his wife, I have no other choice but to become part of his unfortunate life. Yet I'm not a vessel of Liu Xiaobo. I'm very fond of poetry and painting, but at the same time, I have not come to view Xiaobo as a political figure. In my eyes, he has always been and will always be an awkward and a diligent poet. Even in prison, he has continued to write his poems. When the warden took away his paper and pen, he simply pulled his verse out of thin air. Over the past 20 years, Xiaobo and I have accumulated hundreds of such poems, which were born of the conversations between our souls. I would like to quote one here. Before you enter the grave, don't forget to write me with your ashes. Do not forget to leave your address in the netherworld. Another Chinese poet, Liao Yiwu, has commented on Xiaobo's poem. He carries the burden of those who died on June 4th in his love, in his hatred, and in his prayers. Such poems could have been written in the Nazis' concentration camps or by the Decembrists in Imperial Russia. Which brings to mind the famous sentence, "It is barbaric to write poetry after Auschwitz." Such statements are also characteristic of the situation in China after 1989. I understand, however, this award is not meant to encourage Liu Xiaobo, the poet, but rather to encourage Liu Xiaobo, the political commentator and the initiator of Charter OA. I would like to remind everyone of the close connection between these two identities. I feel that Xiaobo is using his intensity and passion as a poet to push the democracy movement forward in China. He shouts passionately as a poet, "No, no, no," to the dictators. In private, he whispers gently to the dead souls of June 4th, who to this day have not received justice, as well as to me and to all his dear friends. Yes, yes. Finally, I extend my deepest gratitude to the PEN American Center, the Independent Chinese PEN Center, and everyone in attendance at this event tonight. Liu Xia, April 17th, 2009, at my not free home in Beijing. I would like to add one last word. To this day, at this moment, inside China, we have over 40 writers, poets, and journalists still in jail. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to take a second to acknowledge my colleague at 60 Minutes, Keith Sharman, who worked long and hard to do the video segments tonight. But most of all, I want to thank all of you for coming and for supporting PEN. Enjoy your dessert and champagne. Thank you very much.